Welcome to the 5th episode of the Magnetic Podcast. We always say for lack of a better name, but we're going to be running some A/B tests because we love everything to be tested in content, including the name of our show. So we thought, why would we name it? It's kind of like naming a subject line before you actually know how it's going to perform. And we're like, wow, we're so smart. But today there's people who are way smarter than us by landslides. And that people is a person, and that person's name is Warren Zenna. Warren, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Really good, Steve. Great to be here with you.
Yeah.
And thanks for inviting me, man. I'm looking forward to this conversation a lot.
Well, I was telling you a story. So for the audience, real quick, I knew that I wanted to get 5 impactful guests to do call it a little lightning blitz here. We did 5 episodes. We were going to edit them and get them up and say, okay, is that the direction we want to go? So I picked Mark Smith.
Mark and I are good friends.
Mark.
Hey, we're very good friends, Mark and I. We talk like 3 times a week now, actually.
Yeah, he was
awesome.
Great. He showed up in the sunglasses, like he was on point. It was you.
He's a superstar.
Well, yeah, and he thinks the same of you. So there's some high, and I think both highly of you. I wanted you both on the show, and I was very fortunate to get you both and a few others. But really, this is to me is like, where did people kind of show up out of nowhere? Which that nowhere for me was LinkedIn. At pivotal points in my life, whether they knew it or not, I kind of looked at them and said, "Man, that was powerful." I told Mark Smith, for example, like, "Hey, man, there's some text message exchanges you had that really changed my life, made me stop and think about it." I shared with Warren when I was on your podcast, I was in the middle of some tough things. We all go through them. Yeah. Mine was a divorce, some financial hardships due to a failed financial part of business. But I still wanted to show up that day because I was like, man, I'm making the choice to still go ahead and not really talk about it negatively, right? And so that was the chance for me to, like Warren asked a question. I was like, oh, I can talk about it. I don't need to be negative. I can be real. And maybe that story helps somebody. And I believe that that's the power of podcasting. And Warren, you're really good at being an advocate for the CRO community. You own multiple businesses. You don't have this arrogance at all when you post. You're very informative. You seem to be Mr. Community, but I'm sure this took a while to get to this point. And of course, everybody's going to say, oh, no, I'm not all that. Thank you. But from the outside looking in, which is what content is, the lens makes it look as such. So talk to me about that, because at some point in time, you have to go back and say, when was the first piece of content that you created and why did you create it when you think about sales and creating content?
Yeah, it's really great stuff. But first, thanks for all that. And I did appreciate, your story. And look, everyone's gone through what you're talking about. And if they haven't, they're going to subvert it, right? So appreciate that a lot. And, I know your style is real authentic, and that I'm drawn to people like that very much. So thank you. And, when you talk about content, let me think about that, because it's a really good point. I think this word is, I'm friends with Tom Goodwin, we talk a lot, and, he makes fun of the word content all the time because it's this sort of just it's a blob, so many things sit in it, you can drop 80 things inside of the word content. But I guess it's hard to know what else to call it, right? Is it like I made a video, I put a post up? I mean, you can get very granular with your description, but, it's communication, right? It's some form of communication, and there's intent behind it, right? So, I don't know, looking at sort of like evolution, I'm some old dinosaur or something, but I've always been a storyteller.
Yeah.
So I have a sort of a very bizarrely extroverted personality. I'm a lot calmer now than I was when I was younger. I was a really crazy, wild, very loud kid. And I did a lot of things. I was involved in a lot of things. I was a performer. I was a singer and all this stuff, but I was always, the person who was like standing up in front of people. If you look at like these old, let's say you look at the movie that they make about, ancient Greece or Rome, there's always the one guy who's like standing up in the square and everyone's listening to him. Like he's either a jester or he's like a philosopher or he's got something to say. It was always me, just never shut up. So that was probably my first content, was just sort of like, I don't know, I probably without doing much Freudian analysis. It was just, I wanted attention.
Yeah.
I wanted girls, there was really not much that complicated, like any young man wants. But, I had something to say, I was very sort of pointed about things, and I probably knocked down a lot of furniture doing it over the years. But what happened was I got involved in sales. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to get into it here because it'll take too much time, but I have a podcast episode of my own coming out with a close friend of mine who gave me my first sales job a long time ago, like 30 or something years ago. It's actually a really cool story, but I'll save it because it's long. But the point is that it was a really good funnel and channel for what I do, because, I know this, and anyone who's in marketing knows this. I mean, good persuasive dialogue it's a story, right? You tell a good story, you weave a good tale, that has a protagonist, it has risk, it has an ending, it has a breakthrough. These are things that we just naturally as human beings we're very drawn to. And what we had to do, and this is the old days, I'm 58. So, and I was selling back then, we only had basically just email and a phone. And we spent, it's really actually amazing how much time he did. I didn't realize how much this trained me, how much time we'd spend writing an email to somebody. Like we would get very strategic. Jim is my friend. He's a brilliant salesperson. And we'd sit around and we'd look at, like you do today, but you did it in a much more sort of, I'd say, analog way. We'd look at, we had a whiteboard and we wrote the name of all the big accounts that we wanted. And in our case, we were going after the monsters. We were going after Toyota, Sony and everything. And there was always like one guy or girl, let's say, at that company who we knew that we had influence. Like it was this person we knew we had to get their attention. And the only way we had to do it was probably through email, because how else are we going to reach them? Yeah. And we'd spend all this time writing this, like word crafting the sentences and making it as succinct as possible so that when you hit the send button, you know that you captured exactly what you wanted in a way that would like really get into the mind of this person. And we got really good at it to the point where, I'm kind of going on here, but you asked me this question, which is my first piece of content. It was probably me yapping on when I was
This
8.
is great.
But here's the thing. I did this one thing because we got really good at this. And I'm really good at it today. Something I sort of perfected in a lot of ways. So I was trying to sell into the automotive industry. So if you're going after GM, or Ford, or these big good three, well, it's hard. There's multiple. How many people are trying to get their attention because they have a lot of money? And at the time when I worked for this guy, Jim, we were creating something really interesting. And this was like the first plank of what I want to say here, which is important. And this is you have to have a good story to tell. It's not just that you can tell a good story. You have to have a good story, right? It's actually really important because we had a great story. We were working for a company that invented this idea of building, and seems sort of old hat today because like no shit, but back in 1998, the idea of building video games for companies was, what are you nuts? Who the hell? Why would any company want a video game? It was really actually revolutionary. And so this company bought a video game company. And even though this video game company continued to create consumer video games, we utilized their capabilities to create custom branded video games for brands. And it was brilliant. It was this really amazing thing. And so what I'm saying is this, is that early on I learned something, which is that if you're going to go work for somebody, like not for yourself, make sure you work for a company that sells a product or service that is a great story, because it's just easier, right? Mm-hmm. So that was one thing. I had a great thing. So I wrote this email, crafted it. It was this guy, it sat at the top. If you look at like the pyramid of marketing at General Motors, I think it was actually I think it was at GM at the time. He was like the influencer. He was probably in his early 80s at this point, but he invented and designed all these cars. And like whenever he said something, like we knew that like if he said it, if he uttered it, it influenced everybody in the industry. So we knew that we had to get his attention. Okay. Yeah. And I had to get this guy to buy into it. So I wrote him this email, and I spent like months crafting this email. I had one shot, and he got the email. Apparently what I heard, the story is he forwarded it, my email. I was like 30 years old, maybe in my late 20s.
Big deal.
And he forwarded the email to all these brand managers. And his question was, why are we not doing this? Something like that.
And you couldn't track the forward, right? You couldn't track the open.
But I knew it happened because all of a sudden, a lot of people were gravitating back. Like I got all these inbound from people which we call inbound now. Now it was just like calls or something. But the other thing that happened was someone in the industry who I got to know, a lot of people in the industry said, "Oh, so you're the guy. You're the guy." Because this piece of content, which is an email, which is, by the way, is content. Okay. Sorry, but it is, if you do it well, it's nothing more. It's content, right? Mm-hmm. If you do it right and you get their attention, it can make a big impact, especially when the right person takes that and sends it to other people, right? And adds their own content to it. Yeah. So I would say that was probably my first foray in the idea of kind of taking honing communication for the purposes of trying to get people to get attention and make them
React.
change their mind or make a decision or have a different perspective, right? Which I think is really what we should be doing. So anyway, I know it's a very long answer, but that's what I think about when I think of that question.
It's powerful though, because the fact that you did that now, the same thing could be done today and could be done on its own thoughtfully, could be done with a Chrome extension less thoughtfully. I also would say that you probably sold as much revenue then as you do now. A good salesperson, if they had $1 million target in 1998, could hit it. A good salesperson has many, many more tools in 2023. They have $1 million target. They can't hit it. Right. And I'm like, man, we've really overtooled our reps and really undertooled sort of the storytelling 101. So instead of me maybe thinking about the Chrome extension that can solve that problem, I went to school to be an actor, Warren. And I was always making up stories as a little kid. And I made them up terribly. Like I got caught all the time. My cat got ripped up in a tornado. My grandpa's hair got started on fire. And my teachers would tell my mom, they were like, I'm kind of worried. Like Steve is, he believes it. And she's like, well, he's going through some tough stuff at home. His dad left, And so like stuff happened, but then the stories got less, I call it, in high school, it was Steve tells the best stories, but he exaggerates a lot on purpose to make you like them. And I was like, I was known as a storyteller. So I was like, hey, I went to school to be an actor. And I was like, I'm not that great at this, but I didn't like telling somebody else's stories. And that's what I figured out. Didn't mean that I thought they weren't good. I just didn't like it. I wanted to write my own. And I read a lot of books, a lot of movies. And so that's when I said, hey, I want to be a playwright. They said, we don't have any playwright programs. I said, can we make one? And they said, sure. And I did that for a year and a half, applied to Yale, got rejected, became a salesperson. 25 years later, rejected myself from sales, became the owner of a content-led selling agency. And so here we are, right? Full circle is, I think, going back, if you want to sound young, Warren, instead of old and antiquated, let's say that content was something that cavemen were doing. Drawing pictures. We can all see them on walls. Why did they draw the picture? It depends, right? Look out, watch out. I was here. There's a whole language that was being conveyed to guide people. And you said that, Warren, is to guide them. The other day, and I'll go to the second question here, Devin Reed had a post, and I'd like to say the name because I think Devin's good at creating content. And he said, the goal of content, if you're trying to convert to revenue, you need to understand that you need to change the way that people fundamentally act and feel in about 5 to 10 seconds. And that is why it's so hard. And I sat there and I looked and I was like, I haven't read one of his posts that hit me like that, but I was like, man, that feels stressful to me because that's what I have to do every day for clients. And, some people make 1,000 cold calls a day, and that's what they do for a client. We make 15 LinkedIn posts. Trust me, we are still nervous about whether they land or not. And so I think going into this question now, you are monetizing content now. Fast forward from where you were creating great emails just past the typewriter, probably on a computer.
Yeah, we were using computers. We were using computers. They weren't very sophisticated, but yes, we were using computers.
Like the one that had the Oregon Trail on it. That's what we had, at least at the radio station in 98. It was like a computer with a disc, the floppy disk.
Yeah, exactly. And so you had to stick the disc in, and there was like a drive, and it's funny.
But you did that. Here we are now, and you can make content, and you do every day. Like, are you putting it out today every day?
I would say, and this is the interesting thing. So, one of the things I do, and because I'm pretty, I'm a loudmouth on LinkedIn. I didn't really start utilizing social media for business for a really long time. I sort of resisted it. Like there was a big push to use Facebook, and I just don't like Facebook as a platform. I just sort of have a certain aversion to it. I don't like it very much. So I never did any Facebook stuff. Instagram, when I had an Instagram account, all I would do is just take cool pictures, and I didn't usually do much except just show the picture. But, some of them were clever enough that people would say stuff. So I sort of knew that I probably had a knack for this sort of thing, but it just never appealed to me. And then what happened was when I started this business, I started the CRO Collective, I realized that LinkedIn was going to clearly be the channel that I was going to get business because this is where all the CROs are. This is obviously like the right environment for it. So, and I always had a LinkedIn profile. I didn't have much of a following. I was just some, guy who sold stuff. I came up with this idea for focusing on chief revenue officers, which, we don't need to get into too much, but the point is that it goes back to my earlier point, which was I had this story Like I had this thing that I sort of kind of stumbled upon through a lot of work that, again, this is more like just to kind of characterize the stories, just there's this unserved market and there's a reason why it's unserved, and it has really bad impact on businesses and it needs to be fixed. And here's the reasons. And, as I started to put this together, I started to kind of test it. Like I gotta say, like I'm normally sort of shy about this stuff, but I literally experimented live on LinkedIn. So I just started putting it out there with the idea in my mind that, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to get it right. I'm going to just keep on doing it until it gets better and better and better. And I'm going to do it right in front of people. Yeah. So I'm going to get up in front of everybody and I'm going to try and play, a famous solo on the trumpet in front of everybody. And I'm going to play that solo on the trumpet over and over and over again until it's perfect. And people are going to listen to 80 bad versions of it until all of a sudden it sounds really good. And I did that. And, I in real time sort of worked out my stuff. And you were talking about A/B testing. For me, it was just, is anyone listening? Is anyone listening? Yeah. As I honed it better and I got better at it and I got it down to a science, which I feel like I've got a really good handle on what I'm trying to do now. Yep. I just had a lot to say about it because I'm hearing all this stuff, and LinkedIn just became this playground for me. And, I got to say something like, so I read a lot of books. I used to read a lot of authors, like fictional authors. And I was really fascinated about the process. Like, how do people write? So if you have someone who's a really good writer, I'm fascinated. Like for example, you think about someone like Stephen King, this prolific guy who has I don't know how many books this person writes. It's insane, right? And they're all so big and there's a lot of writers like that. I'm fascinated by one thing. I've heard many authors say, I don't have a process. I don't have one. I've heard this one. I remember it was talking about how it's like, I listen to these authors and they say like they do this thing and they have this whole procedure. It's like, I have no idea. I don't know what they're talking about. I just start writing and I just sort of do it. And, I don't think about it. And that's me. I don't have any process. I don't have like a schedule. I don't have an editorial calendar. I don't have a goal. I could give two shits about who's following me or not. I don't ever look at my follower count or it's never on my mind. What it really is for me, and I'm not saying I'm bragging, I'm just saying I probably should have a process. I'd probably be even better, but I don't. And so it's more like I just write when I feel like it. Yeah. And then there are some weeks and all of a sudden I've got all these ideas and I start blasting them. And then there's a week or three that goes by that I have nothing to say at all. Yeah. What I do find I do a lot more now, and I'm doing it more lately, and I really like, is I like responding to other people's stuff and weighing in on conversations and adding my perspective on an existing topic. That I do a lot more. I think I do that easily 3-4 times a day because I'm looking at LinkedIn and someone says something and I comment on it. And I find that to be really interesting too, because, now there's an energy that's already been created by somebody that other people have captured and they're talking about it. And then I insert myself into that discussion and I can have like an impact on it. And that to me, I think is a really interesting thing that you could see growing in this medium that I'm finding really interesting.
Are you talking about the ability to weigh in as a thought leader, meaning on those questions that are kind of prompted, or more organically throughout?
No, just organically. Like I see a post and, someone says something that touches either one of two things. Either I see it's very close to my business. They're either saying something that I firmly believe and agree with. So I want to sort of like amplify it. So I'm like, yeah, you're right. And here's another thought on that. Yep. Or I see someone say something that I just think they're wrong. Like that's just not right. And I want to say something about that. So I'm like, yeah, look, I don't agree with this at all. And I'm not afraid to say it. I like, being sort of, that's what I am. And my point I'm making is that form of content, commentary, is a really fascinating way to kind of think. And again, I don't think about it. I'm not thinking like, oh, I haven't commented a lot this week. I need more comments. Like I have some sort of like measuring platform that I determine this stuff. It all just is very organic. I don't have any plan. And so that's just, I know it might not be so satisfying for people that are looking for some method, but I don't have one. I literally am just thinking this stuff up and I do it. It's just,
you said an interesting word there. I think the same people, and I'm one of those same people who can tend to obsess over methods and methodology, can obsess over content methodologies, right? There's structures and pillars and it can get pretty heady, right? And I think that's the kind of stuff that turns people off. You just heard Warren say it. And I built a $7.5 million business, not knowing what the hell I was doing with content. So it's very possible.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't claim to have some, I actually worked with a company for a while as a partner. Like they helped me and they put together this whole framework, which by the way, I tell people to do this. This is nuts. Like, so when I coach and I train and I advise people, I tell them, well, you should have a content library. You should have, subtopics and what you want to write about. And I say that because what am I going to tell them? I'm going to say, don't worry about it. It'll happen. That's not advice. I mean, that's not going to help anybody. And that works for me, but I don't think it's a really good way to, it's almost like saying, like, if you watch somebody walk through a swamp of alligators and they just kind of prance through and they don't get bitten, and you say, I don't know, I just sort of feel my way through it. Would you tell somebody to do that? Would you say, yeah, no, they'd probably get killed. Works for me. Yeah. Doesn't mean it will work for them. So what I tell them is, I'm like, put together a framework, because someone built one for me once. It was, it logically made sense. It has these like sheets and different topics and subtopics, and you fill them in, and then, it organizes your thoughts. So I do see the practical wisdom in being more methodical. And I would probably say someone should probably think about that, unless they had, like me, some weird personality where they don't need one. They can do it anyway. Yeah. But, someone that comes to me and asks me for help on this probably doesn't have that, or else they wouldn't be asking me for it. They'd probably doing it already. Right. So I think, like, I don't look at people like that. I in fact, my viewpoint on people whom are really organized and meticulous, I'm jealous. I'm like, man, I wish I was like that. I'd probably be 1,000 times better at this. Like, I wish I brought more discipline to what I'm doing. I'm so lazy. I do this just whenever I want, and it works. And boy, if I added some method to this, I could be 1,000 times better, but I'm just so lazy, and screw me. So that's how I think of it. I don't look at it like someone like that is anal and like restricted. I think they got their shit together, and I'm just winging it, and I'm an idiot, and I shouldn't be. So I don't really know if there's a right or wrong way, but I can tell you, it's my own insecurities. That's how I view people that are organized. I think, like, I'd rather be like them. So it's just a weird thing. I don't know what's right. I have no idea.
Well, too much of it. I'd say the hyper organization that we're seeing on LinkedIn is not, LinkedIn is certainly prompting people, hey, do you want to write this post with AI now? I see more probably AI in commenting than I do in the posts, which is always a terrible way of time managing, right? Because I think, like you said, comments are where you should be showing up the most authentic.
Yeah, I have a real problem with this. I did it once. What I did was it was like 6 months ago. I thought, I'm going to teach. Let me see if I can do this anyway. I'm wonky. I like technology. I'm going to teach a ChatGPT to talk like me. You know how you can do that. You just have it read a bunch of your shit. And then it says, this is me, and this is my posts, and this is my tone. Now write an article about this using that same tone. And it wasn't very good. I mean, it was like, okay. Anyway, but I posted it. I put it on there, and it was lengthy. ChatGPT spits out these big blobs of crap. And I put it up there, and I wanted to see what the response was, and it wasn't favorable. And I wrote in a comment, like, by the way, I didn't write this. An AI wrote it for me, because I didn't want to. I'm okay with being upfront about it. But, I honestly, I just don't think that, my opinion is you have to find your voice. You have to develop your voice. You have your own tone. I have my own tone. Steve, you have your own tone. You have to develop that so that people kind of know when they're listening that it's you that's talking, right?
Yeah.
And if you use a tool like that, you're not developing your voice. You're not. It's my opinion here. And I think, you got to work at it. You got to keep on writing and writing until you find a place where all of a sudden you feel like you're flowing and you have a voice, and people are used to you, and they get accustomed to your voice, and they like it. And some people don't like it. Matter of fact, I'd even say if everybody likes what you're saying, you're not saying much.
We believe that strongly.
You gotta
the magnetic pull.
Don't like what you're saying as much as they like what you're saying. I mean, you should be, if you have a really firm point of view about something, it's going to polarize. It's just life. And I do think you should strive not to be a polarizer, but you should strive to have a point of view that has enough, integrity, that it's solid enough that it can withstand people pushing it back up against it, which means that's going to create tension. And that tension is what makes conversation. That's what makes people provoked. And that's what drives people to think more and change their minds. And so I really think that when I see people trying to be all milk toasty on LinkedIn, I can tell what they're doing is they're trying to win a popularity contest. It's like, dude, what do you really think? Just say it. It's fine. You'll find your people, you know?
The B2B community is in general very much adverse to letting people see who they really are. And I think that when people do, they're always handsomely rewarded. Even if it's a, post about, hey, this is a problem I used to have, to your point, you might alienate some people. Oh God, here we go. Another alcoholic post or whatever. Well, you know what? That post to that person meant a lot. And then maybe, 6 CEOs or something in their ICP reached out to them and said, hey, great post. Glad you had the courage to do it. So I always say, man, at the end of the day, it has to feel good to you. So even if you're hiring a team, I mean, we're a team that supports a lot of people. There's no shortage of ghostwriters out there.
Right.
I would say that there's a shortage of authentic posts that can be written by a ghostwriter because you have to spend time with them. They need to get to know you. And I see a lot of people now going out on LinkedIn and spying, $300-$500 a month. Like, get your own ghostwriter. Well, they don't interview you. They might ask you questions over email, right? And then da-da-da. And I'm like, but is that giving you the same journey that Warren had and that I had? Because to me, the money on the back end is nice, but it doesn't, that's not when the celebration happens.
Yeah.
For me, it's always the creative process, getting to know people and problem solving at scale that I find to be the greatest joy. I know I talk a lot about money, or I used to talk a lot more about it, call it revenue, but now I look at it like, gosh, Warren's a pretty smart guy. That person, Justin's a pretty smart guy. You go around, I met a lot of smart people. Met Mark America Smith on there, one of the most highest integrity guys I've known, right? So for all the bad stories that people might pull out of, oh, this isn't real. I just had someone text me on Friday. They said, hey, I bet you all these influencers don't make all the money they think they do, or that they say they do. I'm like, I don't know if I care. I mean, it sounds like you do.
Again, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If I have conviction about my point of view and I can defend it, then I don't care at all.
Yeah.
Because, it is, I've said this before, and, a lot of people who know me outside of the business world, because I have a lot of friends in the business world outside, they'll all agree with something that I've said before, which is that I'm not saying this is a good thing or bad thing, by the way. It just is. I'm the same everywhere. I don't have a business sort of personality and then a home personality and then a friend, which I think is fine. I don't actually see a downside to that. There's no wrong or right. Just for me personally, the way my brain works, I'm just always the same person all the time. Maybe that's not so good. Like, maybe I sometimes should be a little bit more kind of, quote unquote, professional or whatever you want to call it. But, after living 58 years, I realized, I don't want to. I just want to be that same damn person all the time. It's a lot less work. And, I'm okay with maybe, I don't want to say alienating, but carving out the, my peeps, so to speak, like you and I, right? We're here doing this thing. You wouldn't have asked me to be here if we didn't connect it some way. And there are plenty of people who have amazing podcasts that would say, I'd never have that schmuck on my podcast. He's a loudmouth. He's a pain idiot. He's an idiot, but that's fine. It doesn't matter to me. It's like, we'll find our things. So I'd say really, and I know we're not in the advice giving thing here, but, people listening to this, I think we're kind of thinking about content. And I do believe what you put out needs to be as close to you in real time as possible. If you're trying to be something that you're not, or put on a air or create a persona, you've got to be really good at it. Like some of these YouTube stars are really good at this. They're amazing at it. They create these sort of weird personalities, and they're amazing at how they've really mastered some sort of like a YouTube personality. And that's amazing. But, most people aren't going to do that. Most people are just trying to just make a living, and they're putting their name above their title, and they're putting themselves out there, and they're inviting them into their world. And, it's a brave sort of tightrope walking experiment for a lot of people. Not everybody's weird like me, who I give two shits. I talk whatever I want, but, I do understand, and I'm empathetic that it's not easy. And I would say, you got to just be real. People really respond to that. Human beings have an amazing brain for this stuff. People can detect in 2 seconds when you meet somebody whether they're being genuine or not. It's incredible. And, you know, the thing is that we don't have the ability to make that ascertain in the frontal lobe, but our reptilian part of our brain immediately can say, something's off about this person. But the front of our brain is like, oh, no, I need to be polite. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm judging them. I should give them a break. If you just listen to your reptilian brain, you'd know in 2 seconds whether or not you're dealing with someone that you don't like or not. And that's our gut, right? And I think that, you know, you want to try and get to a point where you're being as real as possible because people, their brains are wired for that, you know? So,
One
you know,
of
who
the
are
most
you?
interesting things I've heard, Warren, I want to get your thoughts on this, is but the posting to social media, when done best, is like a reflection of yourself, like a mirror, right?
Yep, I think so.
The hard part for a lot of people is seeing the reaction to that, right? Because when we don't post to social media, we're safe from that, right? We don't need to be subject to.
It's a high wire act, man. I mean, you're basically saying, all right, I'm going to actually be real, and then someone may not like me.
Yeah,
someone may disapprove of me.
Yeah,
you know, for some people, and I'm not any different. You know, it can be devastating when you did disapproval. But you know,
I'm a recovering disapproval.
We're all like, right? Everyone, right? We're all looking for something like that. And that's fine. But what I do think, and I know you know this because of the journey you've been on, is that you develop the ability to understand that stuff is it's all made up. You know, it's all very arbitrary. It's not really true. I mean, what does acceptance really mean? You know, it's all very much like all shit that I could speak personally, like when I've gotten to a point now, it's like, to say I don't care what people think about me would be a lie. Because of course I do, but I don't let it bother me. Like, it's not something that like I walk around thinking, oh, you know, yeah, I wince a little bit when I see someone, you know, maybe say something I don't like or have a negative reaction to me, but you know, it disappears very fast. I'm like, okay, whatever. So, you know, they don't know me or I say, you know what, they're right. What they said was actually right. I am those things. And I know those things aren't desirable. And okay, I can live with it. You know, like that's true. That's true also, you know, is sort of sticking with the theme here that your content is a reflection of yourself. If it is, then you know, you're putting out something out there, which by the way, video content now is very popular and that's even more exposing. I like video content. You can see I'm doing a lot more of it. And I think there's something cool about it. As a matter of fact, not to switch gears a little bit, but I think it's what I do now, which is cool. Sometimes when I see a post on LinkedIn and I really like the content or I like the topic, what I'll do is if it's something I have a lot of thoughts about, I'll make a video and I'll put the video link in the comment as opposed to me just writing something. And, you know, I'm finding it's a really cool form of expression for me because I can just free form in front of my camera. I can just say what I want and just press click. And I do know that for some people, that's like a death-defying feat for some people. And I really respect that. So here's the thing. When I see people put stuff out on platforms like this, I have two reactions. One is either the normal positive, negative, the binary, that sucked or that was great. Yeah. Then the other part of me, that's the human part of me, which is, wow, that was brave. Yeah. Like I bet that person had to really think about that just now to put that out there. And they're probably like sitting there cringing, wondering like what's going to happen to them as a result of that. But they did it anyway. And I think that's really cool. So there is this sort of thing like, you know, just go for it. Just do it. Speak, you know, not too much. I mean, you know,
it's a little bit like high school, but if you made it out of high school, you can do fine on LinkedIn, right? You have your cool kids over here. You have your clicks. I always say like I don't know who the homecoming king is, but it seems like the queen right now is Jen Allen. Like she's having her time on LinkedIn. She deserves it too. I mean, Jen has now been 8 years in the making of, and everybody, I don't want to say these like famous people either. We're talking about business people who are ultimately getting business revenue and providing a solution for that. Jen is working with Lavender currently, right? So before that, it was the Challenger sale. That's where she cut her credibility in her teeth. And I've talked with Jen about the Challenger sale. She knows her shit.
Yep, she does.
Incredibly well. Yep. It is not that she is the popularity contest. It's everything she did up until this point.
Look, you'd like to know and think that it shouldn't just be your personality that wins the day. It should be the message that you're trying to send. Right. So in my case, it was when I finally had a message, which again, I don't want to get too deep in this because it's kind of boring, but this idea of this misplacement of the chief revenue officer role was a big revelation for me in terms of a problem. And when I was able to capture that narrative, it gave me a voice, right? It gave me a place. Actually, no, it didn't give me a voice. It gave me a frame that my voice would fit well into. Because
you were like,
I'm not getting
the musings.
I'm not talking about me, who the hell wants to talk about me? I'm talking about something else that affects people in business, but it's me that's talking about it. That's my point. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of the story and you, and it's that combination of those two things that results in a third thing, which is the content. And that's what I think what content is. It's a story or an information and you combine those two things together and it's a unique thing. And I think you have to have both of those. You have to have a great story or a great message, and you have to have a great sense of yourself. And when you put them together, you got a great communication or a great content platform. And I think that's sort of like the goal,
Yeah, not everybody is Bruce Springsteen, because that would mean that if you bought a guitar and had access to play in front of people, that you would be able to write the album Nebraska.
Yep.
That is the difference between, I think, a lot of people is, yes, anybody can post to LinkedIn. No, not everybody will be good at it. No, not everybody will make money from it. Some people will make a lot of money and then they won't. But just like music, don't do it because of that. Do it because you want to play the guitar. And maybe Nebraska influenced you and you hear some remnants of that in your song, right? But I doubt you're going to have Bruce walk into your concert down the hall. But if that matters to you, go do it, right? Because it's your life. Chris Walker influenced me in my early days. He said something. He said, he looked in the camera that very, well, hold on. Let me give my best Chris Walker impersonation. I'm going to have to.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
So kind of what you got to do. And he was just like, very much like, you need to just start the company you've been thinking of, create a podcast, post every day. Trust me, nobody's doing it, and da-da-da. And I was just like, that's it.
Yep.
So that piece of content, not that I've done anything great, was the thing that inspired me. It was the tipping point. And the way he said it, because to your point is be yourself and say what you think about it is way more interesting than saying it.
Yep.
Because it's already been said. Everything's already been said. People want to know what your thoughts and feelings are about it. And then they're either going to be doing this or they're going no. And no typically is shut the channel off. LinkedIn's not very good at hosting arguments, nor probably should it be.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
The place for it. But we could, it gets pretty technical. It also gets very storytelling. Yeah. And it's doing this thing right now, which is the amazing part of Riverside, where it's going to keep me jittery and then it goes to you jittery, but the video comes out perfect at the end. That's like where we're at with podcasts, which is crazy.
Got it. Yeah, so I want to talk about that a bit. Just one thing, and that is what's unique about LinkedIn. And people can knock it all they want, and a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I don't particularly agree with them, but it's you. It's verified. It's your name. It's your profile. It's your resume. It's your background. It's not like Twitter where you can create some weird handle and hide behind it. This is much different, and I like that actually.
It's a good point. Reddit, Twitter is where a lot of the faceless people go. And there's a lot of business to be done on those platforms. And I think the credible business, the trust, the rapport that you build, that's what I felt was like this wise soul who knew way more than me, who was a part of the community. And that's why I wanted to get closer to you. We always say that, our name is magnetic. Wasn't super inventive. Just thought of, hey, you know what? When people told me through life, Steve, you're just so magnetic. I was like, well, what do they mean? I wanted to be more of it. Like, I don't want to sound ashamed, but I was just like, yeah, I want to be more of what they say they like. Like, how do I be more of that? Oh, Steve, I love how authentic you are. Then I would overshare, and people would say, you share too much. I'm like, well, what do you want? And they were just like, that's when I got that the audience feedback matters even in real life. Like, you're telling a story at a college party, like either the people crowd around you or they don't. You're a kid, you go to the park, you come and tell your friends a story. They either lean in or they don't. You're in business, you tell a story. They either lean in or they don't. Like, this time they're just handing you money. And that's the only difference. And we're at a different stage in our life. They used to give you applause. They used to do different things. And so everybody's done some form of this, Warren, but give the listeners the advice on how to, I don't want to say get started, because I don't think our listeners are going to in the get started mode. Let's say get started about being serious. They want to start to say, hey, I'm starting my business, or I recently started my business. I want content to be part of my business. I want it to maybe make me some money. I want it to be part of my creative process. What is the advice you would give to them on how to really start to take that seriously or not seriously?
Are you talking about what content development? Taking it seriously?
Yeah, sorry, content development. Yeah. So specifically about content development.
Like I said before, I think it depends what you're up to. So there's going to be a couple of different people listening to this. You got some people who were like you and I, who idiotic people who started their own companies and stuff, and are dealing with all the challenges that come with that. And there's a lot at stake. Again, that's another high wire act. And then there are people who work at companies. They work for somebody else, and they have objectives that are tied to their compensation that they need to achieve. So many of those people are sales and marketing people, right? So, and maybe not. Like it doesn't have to be that. You could be in programming. You could be in engineering. You could be in many things. So I think the first thing is figure out, like, A, what is it that I want to say? But more importantly is, why do I want to say it? Like, what's the objective? In my case, it was, I had a vision for how I could impact businesses, and I wanted to scream from the treetops as loud as I could, because I wanted to create a movement around this role, and I wanted to get everybody to kind of change their direction, like a big pile of fish that all of a sudden changes their direction. Like, I wanted to grab that whole school of fish's attention and have them go this way now because of what I'm saying, right? That's sort of what I want to do. And that direction is different. It's changing things. And I'll benefit from that because I'm sort of a movement, and I'm also, people will seek out my expertise. Now, if you're a salesperson and you're selling some product or some service, and you've decided that you want to use content channels as a way to do that, then you've got to contend with your company's own messaging, because they're doing it too. Hopefully. I mean, sometimes they're not. Steve, they're not doing it well, but sometimes they are. Sometimes they have their own efforts where they're using social and stuff. But the reality is that, look, people follow people. They don't brand. They don't. And so I think to some degree you have to come to a point where you're like, all right, I'm going to talk about my business, the thing I sell on LinkedIn. And what do I do? So this is where I think you sort of have to have a story. And like I said before, you need to be working at a place where there's a compelling enough reason for people to believe what you're doing, that you have something to say. I mean, a lot of people work for companies that they have like products that are like commodities. It's hard to sell that. It's hard to talk about that. It's not exciting. How do you make that exciting? Maybe you can make yourself exciting. Maybe you can say that you have a point of view about this business. You have a perspective about the way people should be conducting themselves in this business. And that might be the platform. But I think there is some point where, if you're just out there sort of poking in the dark and just putting things up, people can tell it looks like you're meandering around and you don't have any real point. You're just sort of someone who comes up, like, the person that walks up to people in a party and they go, "Hey guys," and they just stand there and they don't say anything, and they're sort of looking for attention, but they don't really have anything to offer. You feel bad, because then they sort of slumber away and they go to the other circle and they're, "Hey guys," and you don't want to be that person. You want to sort of know that when you come into that circle, that you're coming in with something of value for people, and you should start to think about that. And if you don't have that, this is another more philosophical thing, Steve. If you don't have that, you should ask yourself why. Because either A, you're not doing something that you feel strongly enough about talking about, or you don't feel connected to, or you don't feel like it's important enough to talk about, or it doesn't give you power. You know how I'm talking about? Like how sometimes when you talk about something, it kind of gives you power. Not, I mean power like to control people, but power like personal energy. And if you don't have that stuff, well, then it's a good indicator that maybe A, you're not looking at it deeply enough, or B, maybe you should be doing something else. Because I do think that the winners in this sort of content era are people who really have a really strong point of view and a passionate perspective on things, and something to bring that's valuable to people. And they win because if they're good at delivering the message, and the message is good, well, then, you got a winning thing, and you have to have them. And I don't think that if you kind of think about that first, I do a little experiment with your own consciousness around that first. That's how I would look at it.
Really profound. Warren, thank you for being on the show. Where do people find you, Warren? And tell them a little bit more, explain in Warren's words what it is you do, where they can find you. Thank you so much for being on the show. I've had a blast
same.
today.
Great conversation, man. We'll love it. So thank you. So you can find me, my company is the CRO Collective. That's CRO, like Chief Revenue Officer Collective. CROcollective.com, Warren at the CROcollective.com. LinkedIn, obviously, you can get me there. You can DM me and say hello. And in short, look, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to change the narrative around the role of the Chief Revenue Officer by recalibrating the way the role is currently viewed in the marketplace, so that more precision is brought to its definition, so that the role can be better realized, its results and value can be better realized at companies where chief revenue officers are supposed to oversee the entire revenue operation and not just run sales. And so I train chief revenue officers, I train people to become chief revenue officers, and I also help companies build CRO ready organizations to become ready for a chief revenue officer. So that's what I do.
Warren, thanks for being on the podcast today. We brought it back in time. We brought it forward in time. I think one thing has stayed consistent. It's storytelling. It's the ability to be yourself and share a unique point of view. So thank you for showing up and being yourself today on our podcast, brother. It's great to see you as always, and always want to celebrate your success.
Thank you. And Steve, thanks for being yourself, man. It's great. And I appreciate being here and having this conversation. So see you around the neighborhood, I'm sure.